The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I adjusted the stack of financial reports on my desk, checking each calculation one final time before the quarterly review. March in Chicago carried that familiar bite of winter refusing to surrender to spring, and I could hear the wind rattling the windows of our downtown office building. My name is Marcus Chen, and for 3 years, I had been the senior financial analyst at Redstone Marketing Solutions, a mid-sized advertising agency that occupied the entire 14th floor of a glass tower on West Madison Street. My cubicle sat in the corner, strategically positioned where I could observe the entire floor while maintaining a clear view of the lake through the massive windows. It was 1995, and the business world still ran on fax machines, physical files, and the occasional email through our clunky network system. I prided myself on being meticulous, arriving every morning at 7:30 sharp, coffee in hand, ready to dive into spreadsheets and budget analyses that kept our agency profitable. The morning routine had become second nature over the years. I would review overnight reports, prepare summaries for department heads, and ensure every dollar was accounted for across our various client campaigns. My colleagues respected my attention to detail, often seeking my input on financial projections and cost assessments. The work wasn't glamorous, but it provided stability and a decent salary that allowed me to maintain a small apartment in Lincoln Park and send monthly checks to help support my aging parents back in San Francisco. Gerald Morrison was our vice president of operations, a man whose personality seemed to embody every stereotype associated with his zodiac sign. He was born on April 10th, making him an Aries through and through, and he never let anyone forget it. His office walls were decorated with motivational posters featuring rams and fire imagery, and he had a coffee mug that read Aries, born to lead, sitting prominently on his mahogany desk. Gerald was 42 years old, stood about 5'10" with prematurely gray hair that he kept perfectly styled, and wore expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. What made Gerald particularly challenging to work with was his explosive temperament and his tendency to take credit for successes while deflecting blame for failures. He had joined Redstone 2 years prior, bringing what he called dynamic leadership and aggressive growth strategies to our traditionally conservative company culture. The man had an MBA from Northwestern and never hesitated to remind people of his credentials, especially when someone questioned his decisions. Our relationship had always been professional, but tense. Gerald seemed to view my careful, methodical approach to financial analysis as a personal affront to his impulsive management style. He would storm into budget meetings, demanding immediate answers to complex questions, and grew visibly frustrated when I insisted on double-checking figures before providing recommendations. More than once, I had watched him berate other employees for minor mistakes, his face turning red as he gesticulated wildly and raised his voice until people 3 cubicles away could hear every word. The turning point came during the 3rd week of March, when we were preparing for the annual client review with Midwest Manufacturing, our largest account worth nearly $2 million in annual revenue. I had been working on their budget analysis for weeks, cross-referencing their advertising spend against market performance data and industry benchmarks. The numbers told a concerning story. Their current campaign strategy was showing diminishing returns, and continuing with the same approach would likely result in significant waste of their marketing budget. My analysis suggested a strategic pivot toward direct mail campaigns and local radio advertisements, moving away from the expensive television spots that Gerald had personally championed. The data was clear and undeniable, backed by months of performance metrics and comparative studies I had conducted across similar manufacturing clients. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation, complete with charts, graphs, and detailed projections showing how the recommended changes could improve their return on investment by approximately 30%. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon in our main conference room. Present were Gerald, myself, 2 account managers, and our creative director. I had arrived early to set up the overhead projector and organize my materials, feeling confident that the data would speak for itself. Gerald entered the room precisely at 2, carrying his leather portfolio and wearing what I recognized as his power tie, a bold red silk number he reserved for important presentations. As I began presenting my findings, I noticed Gerald's expression growing increasingly dark. His jaw tightened when I explained how the television campaign had failed to generate expected leads, and I could see his hands clenching into fists when I detailed the cost inefficiencies in their current media placement strategy. When I reached the section recommending a complete overhaul of their advertising approach, Gerald suddenly slammed his hand on the conference table, causing everyone in the room to jump. "This is complete garbage," he announced, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Marcus, you clearly don't understand the first thing about marketing strategy or client relationships. These recommendations would destroy everything we've built with Midwest manufacturing over the past year." I remained calm, pointing to the specific data points that supported my conclusions. "Gerald, if you look at page 7 of the analysis, you can see that their current television campaign is generating leads at a cost of $87 per qualified prospect, while industry standards suggest we should be achieving results at approximately $45 per prospect. The math is straightforward." His face began turning the familiar shade of red that preceded his most explosive outbursts. "Don't lecture me about math, Chen. I didn't get my MBA to be second-guessed by some number cruncher who's never closed a deal in his life. These clients trust our creative vision, not your spreadsheet fantasies." The room fell silent as Gerald stood up, towering over the conference table. The other attendees looked uncomfortable, exchanging nervous glances while pretending to study their copies of my report. I could feel the tension building like pressure in a steam boiler, but I pressed forward, knowing that my professional integrity depended on presenting accurate information regardless of Gerald's personal feelings. "I understand your concerns about client relationships," I replied carefully, "but we have a fiduciary responsibility to provide them with strategies that maximize their return on investment. The current campaign performance metrics clearly indicate that adjustments are necessary to achieve their stated objectives." That's when Gerald completely lost control. He swept his arm across the table, scattering papers and knocking over a coffee cup that belonged to one of the account managers. Coffee splashed across my carefully prepared presentation materials, soaking through pages of analysis that had taken me weeks to compile. "You arrogant little accountant," he shouted, spittle flying from his lips. "You think you can waltz in here with your precious numbers and undermine months of strategic planning? I've had enough of your insubordination and your constant questioning of my authority. You're fired, effective immediately. Clean out your desk and get out of my building before I call security." The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there for a moment, watching coffee drip from the edge of the table onto the carpet, processing what had just occurred. 3 years of dedicated service, spotless performance reviews, and genuine contributions to the company's success had been erased in a fit of rage because my analysis had challenged Gerald's ego. I stood up slowly, gathering the coffee-stained remains of my presentation while the other meeting attendees stared at their hands, unwilling to make eye contact. "I'll need to retrieve my personal files and complete the handover documentation for ongoing projects," I said quietly. "You'll get nothing," Gerald snapped. "Security will escort you out with whatever personal items fit in a cardboard box. Everything else stays here as company property." The next 30 minutes felt surreal as I packed 3 years of my professional life into a small cardboard box under the watchful eye of a security guard. My desk drawers contained the usual collection of personal items: family photographs, a small desk plant my mother had given me, coffee-stained notebooks filled with project notes, and a few books on financial analysis. My colleagues watched from a distance, offering sympathetic looks but staying far enough away to avoid guilt by association. As I walked toward the elevator, Carrying my pathetic cardboard box, Gerald emerged from his office and called out loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. Let this be a lesson to everyone else about the consequences of insubordination. Loyalty to company leadership isn't optional, it's a requirement for continued employment. The elevator ride down 14 floors gave me time to process the magnitude of what had just happened. I was 31 years old, had been building a solid career in financial analysis, and now found myself unemployed with no warning and no severance package. The Chicago job market in 1995 wasn't particularly robust for displaced financial professionals, and I knew that finding comparable employment would be challenging, especially without a reference from my most recent employer. But as I stood on the sidewalk outside the building, feeling the cold March wind cutting through my dress shirt, something unexpected happened. Instead of despair or panic, I felt a strange sense of clarity settling over me. Gerald Morrison had made a critical error in his assessment of my character. His Aries temperament had led him to believe that his aggressive display of dominance would crush my spirit and serve as an example to other employees who might consider challenging his authority. What Gerald didn't understand was that I had been raised by parents who had immigrated to the United States with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than anyone else to achieve their goals. My father had built a successful import business from a single storage unit in San Francisco's Chinatown, and my mother had worked double shifts as a seamstress while earning her accounting degree through night school. They had taught me that setbacks were temporary obstacles, not permanent defeats, and that patience combined with strategic thinking could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. Over the following days, as I searched for new employment and dealt with the immediate financial pressures of unexpected unemployment, I began developing what would become my comprehensive plan for professional vindication. I realized that Gerald's impulsive decision to fire me had actually provided me with an unprecedented opportunity to expose the systemic problems that were undermining Redstone marketing solutions from within. During my 3 years with the company, I had maintained meticulous records of every project, every analysis, and every recommendation I had made. My personal files contained copies of financial reports, client communications, budget projections, and performance metrics that painted a detailed picture of the agency's operations. More importantly, I had documented numerous instances where Gerald's decisions had resulted in cost overruns, missed deadlines, and client dissatisfaction. The Midwest manufacturing situation was just the tip of the iceberg. Over the past year, I had identified similar problems with at least 6 other major accounts, totaling nearly $8 million in annual revenue. Gerald's resistance to data-driven decision-making and his preference for flashy but ineffective marketing strategies were systematically eroding client relationships and damaging the agency's reputation in the Chicago market. I spent the next 2 weeks organizing this information into a comprehensive analysis of Redstone's operational inefficiencies and strategic missteps. Working from my apartment, I cross-referenced client performance data with industry benchmarks, documented patterns of waste and mismanagement, and calculated the true cost of Gerald's leadership style to the company's bottom line. The picture that emerged was devastating. Under Gerald's management, client retention rates had declined by 18%, project completion times had increased by an average of 12 days, and budget overruns had become routine rather than exceptional. Most damaging of all, I had evidence that Gerald had been deliberately misleading senior management about campaign performance metrics, inflating success rates, and minimizing failure indicators to protect his own reputation. My plan required patience and precise timing. Rather than seeking immediate revenge through confrontation or public accusations, I decided to leverage Gerald's own character flaws against him. His Aries nature made him predictable. He would continue making impulsive decisions, taking credit for others' work, and alienating both clients and employees until his behavior created an opportunity for intervention. The first phase of my strategy involved securing a position with a competing agency that would give me insight into Redstone's client relationships and market positioning. Through networking with former colleagues and industry contacts, I learned that Sterling and Associates, a boutique marketing firm specializing in manufacturing clients, was looking for a senior financial analyst with experience in the Chicago market. Sterling and Associates was located in a converted warehouse space in River North, about 15 minutes from Redstone's downtown offices. The company had been founded by Janet Sterling, a former VP at Leo Burnett who had left to start her own firm in 1992. Janet was known throughout the industry for her analytical approach to marketing strategy and her emphasis on measurable results rather than creative awards. My interview with Janet went exceptionally well. She was impressed by my experience with manufacturing clients and my ability to translate complex financial data into actionable marketing recommendations. When she offered me the position at a salary 15% higher than what I had been earning at Redstone, I accepted immediately, knowing that this role would provide the perfect platform for the next phase of my plan. Sterling and Associates operated with a completely different philosophy than Redstone. Janet encouraged thorough analysis, welcomed challenging questions, and made decisions based on data rather than intuition. The work environment was collaborative rather than hierarchical, and employees were rewarded for innovative thinking and problem-solving rather than blind loyalty to management. Within my first month at Sterling, I had identified 3 potential clients who were currently working with Redstone, but showing signs of dissatisfaction with their campaign performance. Using publicly available information and industry connections, I began building detailed profiles of these companies' marketing challenges and developing preliminary strategies for addressing their needs more effectively than their current agency. The breakthrough came in late May, when I learned through industry contacts that Midwest manufacturing was growing increasingly frustrated with their television campaign results. Their marketing director, Susan Walsh, had been asking pointed questions about ROI and campaign effectiveness, questions that Gerald was apparently struggling to answer satisfactorily. I prepared a comprehensive analysis of Midwest manufacturing's market position and competitive landscape, identifying specific opportunities for improvement that aligned perfectly with the recommendations I had tried to present during that fateful meeting in March. The analysis demonstrated how a strategic shift toward targeted direct mail and local radio advertising could generate qualified leads at $42 per prospect, nearly half the cost of their current television-heavy approach. Rather than approaching Midwest manufacturing directly, which would have appeared opportunistic and potentially unethical, I arranged for Janet Sterling to receive this information through a mutual industry contact who served on the Chicago Marketing Association board. The approach was subtle but effective. Within 2 weeks, Janet received a call from Susan Walsh requesting a confidential consultation about alternative marketing strategies. The meeting took place on a rainy Tuesday morning in early June at a neutral location, the Union League Club downtown. Janet brought me along as her senior analyst, and Susan attended with her assistant marketing manager. As we sat in the club's oak-paneled dining room, surrounded by portraits of Chicago's business elite, I presented essentially the same analysis that Gerald had dismissed so violently 3 months earlier. This time, however, the reception was entirely different. Susan listened intently as I explained the performance metrics and cost inefficiencies of their current campaign structure. She asked detailed questions about implementation timelines, budget requirements, and expected results. Most importantly, she expressed frustration about her current agency's inability to provide clear answers about campaign performance and return on investment. It's refreshing to work with professionals who understand the importance of measurable results, Susan commented as our meeting concluded. Our current agency seems more interested in winning creative awards than generating leads for our business. Janet handled the business development aspects with characteristic professionalism, outlining Sterling and Associates' client service philosophy and presenting case studies from similar manufacturing clients. By the end of the meeting, Susan had requested a formal proposal for a comprehensive review of Midwest Manufacturing's marketing strategy, with the possibility of transitioning their account to our agency. Over the following weeks, I worked closely with Janet's creative team to develop a detailed marketing plan that addressed every weakness I had identified in Redstone's approach. Our proposal included specific performance benchmarks, detailed budget allocations, and a phased implementation strategy that would allow Midwest Manufacturing to transition gradually while minimizing disruption to their ongoing operations. The proposal presentation took place in Midwest Manufacturing's conference room on July 15th. Susan had invited her CEO and CFO to attend, signaling the seriousness of their interest in making a change. I presented the financial analysis, while Janet outlined the strategic framework and our creative director discussed implementation details. The contrast between this presentation and my experience at Redstone couldn't have been more striking. These executives asked thoughtful questions, engaged with the data meaningfully, and demonstrated genuine interest in understanding how our recommendations would impact their business results. There were no interruptions, no personal attacks, and no coffee cups thrown across the conference table. At the end of our presentation, Midwest Manufacturing's CEO announced that they would be terminating their relationship with Redstone Marketing Solutions and awarding their account to Sterling and Associates, effective August 1st. The account represented nearly $2 million in annual revenue, and losing it would create significant financial pressure for Redstone, particularly given Gerald's pattern of operating with thin profit margins. But my plan extended beyond simply winning a single client account. Over the summer months, I had been carefully documenting additional inefficiencies in Redstone's operations and building relationships with other dissatisfied clients. My position at Sterling and Associates provided natural opportunities to network with marketing professionals throughout the Chicago area, many of whom had stories about problematic experiences with various agencies. Through these conversations, I learned that Redstone was facing challenges with at least 4 other major clients, all of whom were questioning campaign performance and considering alternative agencies. Gerald's management style was creating problems throughout the organization. Talented employees were leaving for better opportunities, project quality was declining, and client satisfaction scores were dropping consistently. The most significant development came in September when I learned that Patricia Chen, one of Redstone's account managers, had approached Janet about joining Sterling and Associates. Patricia had been with Redstone for 5 years and had developed strong relationships with several key clients, but she was growing frustrated with Gerald's interference in her account management strategies. Patricia's potential defection represented a critical opportunity. She managed 3 accounts worth approximately $3 million in combined annual revenue, and her departure would create serious client retention challenges for Redstone. More importantly, Patricia had access to internal information about the agency's financial condition, employee morale problems, and client satisfaction issues. I convinced Janet to offer Patricia a senior account management position with a significant salary increase and equity participation in Sterling and Associates. The offer was too attractive for Patricia to decline, and she gave her notice at Redstone on October 3rd, with plans to start at Sterling 2 weeks later. Gerald's reaction to Patricia's resignation was predictably explosive. According to colleagues who remained at Redstone, he called an all-hands meeting where he ranted about employee loyalty and competitive interference, threatening legal action against anyone who shared confidential information with competing agencies. His behavior was so extreme that 2 additional employees submitted their resignations the following week, citing concerns about the work environment. The situation at Redstone continued deteriorating throughout October. Patricia's departure had triggered contract review meetings with her major clients, and Gerald was struggling to maintain these relationships without her account management expertise. His attempts to personally manage these accounts were backfiring, as clients encountered his abrasive personality and impulsive decision-making style firsthand. By November, Sterling and Associates had acquired 2 additional accounts from Redstone, representing another $1.5 million in annual revenue. The pattern was always the same. Clients would grow frustrated with poor communication, missed deadlines, or ineffective campaigns, and they would seek alternatives through industry contacts, who inevitably led them to Janet's firm. Gerald's position at Redstone was becoming increasingly precarious. The loss of major accounts had created serious cash flow problems, and senior management was beginning to question his leadership effectiveness. I learned through industry sources that the agency's founding partners were conducting a comprehensive review of operations and considering significant organizational changes. The final blow came in December when Redstone's largest remaining client, Chicago Industrial Supply, requested a meeting to discuss their account status. Gerald had been managing this relationship personally, and his handling of their recent campaign had resulted in disappointing results and mounting frustration on the client side. I had been monitoring Chicago Industrial Supply's situation through publicly available information and industry connections. Their current marketing strategy was suffering from the same problems I had identified with other Redstone clients: inefficient media placement, unclear messaging, and lack of measurable performance metrics. The company's marketing director had been asking increasingly pointed questions about campaign effectiveness and return on investment. When Chicago Industrial Supply reached out to Janet about potentially switching agencies, I was ready with a comprehensive analysis of their market position and specific recommendations for improving their marketing results. The presentation took place on December 18th in their corporate conference room, with their entire executive team in attendance. My analysis demonstrated that their current marketing strategy was generating leads at nearly twice the industry average cost per prospect, and that a restructured approach could improve their results by approximately 40% while reducing overall marketing expenditure. The presentation included detailed performance projections, implementation timelines, and case studies from similar industrial clients. Chicago Industrial Supply's decision to leave Redstone and join Sterling and Associates was announced on January 8, 1996. The account was worth $2.5 million annually, and its loss represented the final nail in Gerald Morrison's professional coffin. Within 2 weeks of losing the Chicago Industrial Supply account, Gerald was terminated by Redstone's founding partners. The official announcement cited strategic differences regarding agency direction and client service philosophy. But industry insiders understood that his explosive management style and pattern of client losses had made his position untenable. The poetic justice of Gerald's downfall was not lost on me. The same impulsive, aggressive behavior that had led him to fire me in a moment of rage had ultimately destroyed his own career. His inability to accept criticism, his tendency to prioritize ego over results, and his failure to build sustainable client relationships had created the very conditions that made my plan possible. Over the course of 10 months, I had systematically dismantled Gerald's professional achievements by leveraging his own character flaws against him. Every client loss, every employee defection, and every operational failure could be traced back to his fundamental inability to lead effectively. My patience and strategic thinking had proven far more powerful than his bluster and intimidation tactics. The final chapter of this story came in February, when I learned that Gerald had taken a position with a small marketing firm in Milwaukee, representing a significant step down from his previous role as VP at a major Chicago agency. His reputation in the Chicago market had been so damaged that finding comparable employment locally had proven impossible. Meanwhile, Sterling and Associates had grown from a boutique firm to a major player in the Chicago marketing scene, with annual revenue approaching $15 million. My role as senior financial analyst had evolved into a partnership track position, and Janet had begun discussing equity participation as the firm continued expanding. The revenge I had sought was complete, but it had been achieved through professional excellence rather than personal destruction. Gerald Morrison had been defeated not by vindictive actions or malicious attacks, but by the systematic demonstration that his leadership style was incompatible with business success. His Aries temperament, which he had always viewed as a strength, had ultimately proven to be his greatest weakness. As I sat in my new corner office, looking out over the Chicago River and reflecting on the events of the past year, I realized that the most satisfying aspect of this entire experience was not Gerald's downfall, but rather my own professional growth and success. The skills I had developed, the relationships I had built, and the reputation I had earned would serve me well for the remainder of my career. The lesson was clear. Patience, strategic thinking, and professional competence will always triumph over impulsive aggression and personal ego. Gerald Morrison had underestimated my capacity for methodical revenge, and that miscalculation had cost him everything he had worked to achieve. In the end, the best revenge had proven to be simply being better at the job than the person who had tried to destroy my career.